Hi there and welcome. I'm Nicky Sutton and I help people realise the spiritual nature of self and of reality. I hope you're doing really well indeed, sending lots of love. Thank you for joining me. So in this video I'm going to cover a bit about me because you're probably wondering who I am, and also about spiritual awakening and the spiritual awakening process a little bit. So I'm doing 4 videos for Hay House and this is the first, and I'll just explain a bit about spiritual awakening. Now you may have had one yourself, so if you think about what that was like for you, was it a sort of sudden traumatic time, or was it a bit easier? Was it a beautiful experience where you emerged a new person perhaps? It's very different for everyone. I'll also explain a bit about my awakening as well. So just to introduce myself then, as I said, I'm Nicky Sutton and I'm a spiritual and meditation guide, and I started out in 2014 making YouTube videos, and I started a channel called Spiritual Awakening, and it's grown actually really big now, which was amazing, and I'm just super grateful about that. And my aim was and still is to help people through awakening, and the way I do that is to provide guidance and inspiration to people just to help them on their spiritual path. So they might be wondering about a certain aspect of spirituality or need a bit of guidance to help them through, and I just offer my humble opinion, and people seem to enjoy it because the channel has been doing really well indeed. I also set up guided meditations with Nicky Sutton, another YouTube channel, and there I put out guided meditations with lovely music to help people have experiences, to help them heal, to go journeying, for example astral projection and past life regression, to do energy work, mindfulness meditations, all sorts of meditations. Anyway, so fast forward to today, I've written a book with Hay House and it's called Consciousness Rising, Guiding You Through Spiritual Awakening and Beyond. And it arrived in the post yesterday and I was just super happy because it's absolutely beautiful and I really love it. So in Consciousness Rising, as the title suggests, I guide people through awakening and beyond. So in it, it contains what we awaken from, what we awaken to, the triggers of awakening, the stages of awakening, and more as well. And then the aim of the book is to help to guide people onto their spiritual path, because spiritual awakening can be quite a tough time for many people. And so it also contains lots and lots of helpful tips and practices, inspiration and exercises to help individuals to settle onto a level and steady spiritual path and practice moving forward. So a bit about my awakening then. And what inspired me to write this book is that during my awakening, I didn't really feel there was enough support out there for someone going through awakening. Hence, I felt like it would be a great idea to try and help and support others through it. So I went through a traumatic event. It was a few traumatic events. So my father passed away, sadly, and I broke up with the father of my children, and I had a big move to a different area of the country, and all of this, it sent me into quite a depression. It was a tough time and I had to set up home again with my kids as a single mum. And the guilt, if I don't know if many of you can relate, if you've been through this too, the feelings of guilt of when you separate from your partner and you have children and you just worry that your children are going to be okay. But they were very much okay and they thought it was all an adventure and they loved their new school. But I was really suffering, it was a hard time. So I thought back to topics from when I was a child, things that used to inspire me, just as I was trying to search for some light in the darkness. And I thought about, some paranormal experiences I'd had as a child, and also interests in mediumship and the tarot that I'd had from a young age. So I opened up YouTube and I began to search for for wisdom and guidance on spiritual topics such as consciousness and even the paranormal and spiritual practice. And there I went, just straight down the rabbit hole. The whole world opened up to me. Whereas before that, I was very immersed in 3D life, you know, the normal things, going shopping, having a vacation once a year, seeing friends, watching TV, being on social media. It was just the normal things. And I didn't really think past the physical. But the traumatic event really shook my reality and my sense of self started to break down. And then I went on this path of researching and seeking to try and rebuild my reality again, and rebuild my sense of self. And over the last several years, over the last 10 years, you know, it's been a massive transformation. My life is completely different. Now I help others on the spiritual path and through their awakening. And it's not just through their awakening, but it's more advanced topics as well that I go into. So it's really nice to help give back, and I found my purpose and my direction in life as well. So what is awakening? So awakening can be a difficult time, or it can be an easy time. Some people awaken gradually and it's all very blissful, and they realize oneness and the energetic nature of reality and meditation, and they change their priorities and their preferences, and it's quite seamless. But for others, it's a really difficult time, and that's what it was like for me, because when you've lived in your mind, perceived everything as physical, as 3D, and you're very immersed in the system and the paradigm of everything. And then you realize things like the spiritual nature of self, for example, the continuance of life, that perhaps we don't just die and it's lights out. Perhaps it's not like that. Perhaps we have a soul or spirit, or we are soul or spirit, and we go on after death. I mean, this is a big realization, and many people have this realization because of a significant event. They might see a spirit, they might have an out-of-body experience, they might have an amazing mediumship reading, and this removes all doubt for them that we're just physical beings, that actually we probably likely do go on after death. I mean, this is a big realization, and that can send people into awakening. So we realize as well perhaps that we are energy, where, you know, that everything, as science says this, quantum physics, that on the most fundamental level everything is energy, but it all appears solid. How can that be? You know, it seems strange. And then people start delving into science, and this can cause a spiritual awakening. So science can actually cause a spiritual awakening. It's amazing. And then we might also realize the spiritual nature of reality in terms of oneness, as I mentioned, that perhaps everything is one being or one energy, and that we're pinpoints of consciousness within this being. That's something we awaken to as well. We might awaken to mindfulness and the present moment and meditation. And I'll go into the triggers of spiritual awakening in my next video for Hay House. But meditation can actually trigger a spiritual awakening. Many people meditate because they know it's a good thing for you. It helps to calm and quiet the mind. It helps you to process thoughts easier or not get swept up in them. And they meditate without being spiritual in any way. But they can have a meditative experience where they feel psychically expansive or one with all things, and this can send them onto the path of awakening. We also awaken to the law of attraction as well, that perhaps creation, the one being, or God, gives us experiences based on our thoughts, beliefs and vibration. And this is a really big deal because it shows that consciousness interacts with reality, and that consciousness is everything. And we see evidence of that. You know, if you're worried about something, it's more likely to happen. And that creation, in that way, giving you what you need for your learning and experience so that you can learn and grow and work through it. And then perhaps not have those unpleasant emotions again, and then the same thing won't manifest again. So we live and learn to live. We heal ourselves and learn to live in a higher vibration through inner work and healing. Awakening also awakens us to inner work and healing, like I just said, because before that perhaps we were just struggling with anxiety or depression or other unpleasant emotions. And a big part of the spiritual path is inner work and healing. So we awaken to these possibilities, and as we embark on that journey, our vibration naturally rises, and then we manifest better too. You may have always been empathic or psychic a little bit without really realizing it. Perhaps lots of coincidences would happen in your reality, and you would picture people's thoughts in your mind as you were speaking to them, or you'd pick up on their emotions thinking that you were just a very, very emotional person, when really you're absorbing other people's emotions, experiencing them as your own. But upon awakening, we realize that actually we might be empathic or psychic, and that we are sharing in their emotions. And then on the spiritual path, we learn protection techniques to help regulate this, so that we can share in their emotions in order to help them, because that's the way reality is going. We're evolving as a species. These are abilities that are naturally emerging as we evolve. So they're happening for a reason, a good reason, but for many it can be too much. And on the spiritual path, we learn to be able to protect ourselves where needed, but also use those gifts and abilities to help others and ourselves as well. So we also might awaken to synchronicity, those wonderful number patterns, those signs and signposts in reality that tell us that reality is communicating with us, and they might give us a heads up or a confirmation of how we're feeling or what we're experiencing, a little bit of guidance here and there, a little bit of reassurance. Some information and wisdom comes through from reality by these coincidental events, seemingly coincidences happen. But if you were to write down, and many people don't do this, if you were to write down all your synchronicities, you'd have, and I say this in the book, a log of a pretty magical life. Because we forget synchronicities so easily, don't we? But if you wrote them all down, you would see just how often they occur, and how wow it is, and how reality communicates with us. We might also awaken to the societal illusions we've been under. We might realise that, we've been sat in front of the TV, hypnotised too much, and soaking up very materialistic programming. We might be especially absorbed in a career and career progression and money and obtaining physical objects to make us happy. But we awaken to the fact that happiness doesn't lie in these things always. They're often things that we chase in order to make us happy. And we realise that happiness is found within. It's within us. It's actually a change of perspective, a change of perception that we can have. We might also awaken to the paranormal. And, this is a big shift because, para means outside of or apart from, and normal, well, it means normal, right? So paranormal means outside of normal. And you've probably had some paranormal experiences here and there. Maybe you've seen energies, maybe you've sensed energies, perhaps you've seen an apparition or ghost. I know I have, and I wrote them in the book as well. There's some good experiences in there, and of synchronicities and mediumship readings I've had that were just like, wow, Anyway, so that could be classed as paranormal. Maybe you've seen a UFO. I know I saw a brilliant one about 6 months ago. It was bam, right there in the sky, bright orb. And we were staring at it like, whoa, that's super cool. It was a big one. And then it just sort of disappeared. Maybe you've had a paranormal experience like that, an outside of normal experience. That's enough to trigger awakening, and then after the triggering, which I'll go into in the next video, as I said, you start searching and seeking for answers, because this paranormal experience you've just had really shook your concept of reality. It's because you may have experienced that, where your reality has been one way, and then something happened which shot to pieces your concept of reality. And therefore it makes you feel unsafe, unsettled, because you thought everything was just sort of safe and secure as it was, life was how it is, and then everything changes. If you see an apparition or a UFO or have an out-of-body experience, what does that mean? If that can happen, then what does that mean about our reality, the nature of life, the nature of self, and is there a God? Is there a higher power or something like that? Is there more to life than I realize? And this is a really, really shocking thing for our ego. Our ego likes to know how things are, and all of a sudden it might be that everything is different. So awakening can make us feel really different from others as well. So many people say this to me, and they do struggle with that, because they feel alone and suddenly different from everyone. Because upon awakening, how you perceive everything and reality and your priorities and the way you are, everything can change. So you become out of alignment with everyone around you. If everyone else is immersed in the earthly paradigm and they're not, spiritual at all, then they don't really get what you're talking about, or they sometimes might think you're going crazy. But as I always say, you're awakening from a crazy world into a more insightful mode of being. And eventually it will settle, and you will find others on your same wavelength that you can interact with. That happened to me. I felt very alone. I was a single mum, and I didn't know anyone on the spiritual path, and I felt like I was going crazy. And when I approached my family about it, they thought it was something dangerous, that I was getting into something unsafe or cuckoo or crazy, and different family members reacted differently. But one or two of them, I felt really rejected and strange. I felt like I was strange. And this is hard, because during awakening your reality is breaking down, and your sense of self is changing, and that's a time when you need help and support the most. But it's also a time when others start to think, oh, what's wrong with you, kind of thing, and it's not a very nice feeling at all. So again, I go into all of this and ways to help in the book as well. One way to help is to accept that perhaps awakening is a lonely time, and that if you can get through this, you can get through anything, and that it's actually making you stronger. And just knowing that eventually, when you're ready and you've moved through the awakening process, your relationships may well actually be even better than before, because of being on the spiritual path and meeting others that are too. So we do change a lot. Our ego and sense of self changes. And I also write about the 9 Ps, and I was classifying ways that we change during awakening, and they all fell under categories beginning with P, which is just weird. But I can say a few of them now. That one thing that changes for us during awakening might be our profession. We might look at our job and think, well, does that have an overriding benefit to the world or to me, or am I just making someone else rich? I used to be in marketing, because that's what I did my degree in, and I know that if I'd had my awakening while I was still doing that, because my awakening started sort of just after I'd left that profession, but I know that if I was still in that job during my awakening, I'd be thinking, well, I'm earning all this money so that my boss can have a lovely car and that, but it's not really benefiting the world. Maybe I want to work for a more ethical organisation. Maybe still in marketing, maybe I can work for a charity. Maybe I can work for an eco-orientated organisation. renewable energy, you know. So as I often say, that spiritual individuals are still needed in every aspect of work and every industry and profession, because we can bring our spiritual values, our ethics, our way of being into these companies to help to steer them hopefully in a more ethical and tolerant direction, you know. So therefore you don't have to just quit your job and search for another one that's a classic sort of spiritual job, say like a Reiki healer or yoga teacher, which are very valuable professions. But you don't have to do that. Perhaps you could move to a role in another company which is more ethically orientated in the same field that you're in. If you're in human resources, perhaps there's an even better company that would be more beneficial for people that you could move to, you see. So yeah, I go into all that. But another one of the 9 P's which changes for us during awakening is our priorities. We might prioritize less our career, just a little bit, you know. Career is important, but just spending many hours, you know, trying to make it, instead we stop and think, wait a minute, what about the kids? Maybe I should spend more time with them. Maybe I'd like to actually be in the natural world a bit more. Maybe I'd like to grow some vegetables. Just some other things. We change our priorities, perhaps health more, exercise, meditation. We sometimes change our priorities in terms of less of working towards some future goal or aim and being totally immersed in that, to, wow, actually I've got these people around me I want to spend more time with. I want to produce or create something that nurtures my own creativity and helps others, or is a contribution to the world, you know. So sometimes our priorities do change. Our priorities in terms of health definitely change a lot. A lot of people chuck out the contents of their cupboards and refill them again with more healthy, perhaps organic and often vegetarian foods. Many people go vegetarian during awakening because they realize that animals have souls too. Our perceptions, another one of my 9 P's, our perceptions change a lot during awakening. We see reality very differently. Rather than just solid, we see it as all energy, and I am energy too. Therefore, how can I co-create this reality with others using my energetic co-creator influence and my personal power as an infinite being, as infinite soul consciousness? We perceive ourselves, instead of just being human being walking around doing my thing, I am infinite soul consciousness, you know. And a tree in the backyard, it's not just a tree that provides a bit of shade, it's a living, timeless entity there. So we perceive lots of things differently. So we do find our individuality. Spiritual awakening is very much a call to authenticity and a road to individuality. And you might find that you're quite different now to normal, and obviously that makes you feel, sometimes can make you feel lonely or rejected, as I said. But you know, it's a call to your authentic self, to your true self, to find your true self. Perhaps you've soaked up a lot of the thoughts and ideas and beliefs and values of others, perhaps your family over the years, and now it's time to really find your true self. And that is a lot to do with getting in touch with your higher self. So although awakening can be a tough ride, I'll go into that in the other videos. For example, the dark night of the soul can set in and a lot of energetic purging can happen. Just jumping ahead, as we sort of move through awakening, a good exercise that I created was the map of self exercise. It's all about finding your true self, and it should be done intuitively, because these knowings, this wisdom comes through your subconscious mind from your higher self about who you truly are. So it should be done on intuitive knowing, that sense of just knowing that arrives, those feelings, that irresistible pull in a certain direction, where your joy and excitement lies. It's following your heart. So in one column we write down everything that we admire and appreciate about ourselves. Let's say creative or caring or hardworking, something like that. And then beneath that, in the same column, we write down our aims, things that fill us full of enthusiasm, perhaps things we don't feel we've achieved yet, but they would fill us full of enthusiasm. So let's say I want to become a Reiki healer, let's put that down there. Or I want to become a teacher, a sports teacher, something like that underneath. So in that column, we've got the things we love and appreciate about ourselves, and then also our aims that fill us full of enthusiasm. And then we take each of those, so there might be about 6 or 7, maybe 10 of those. We take each of those and we turn it into a sentence on how we will achieve or nurture those aims. So let's say I'm a caring person. We use the I can. So I can use my caring nature in order to help others feel better. Or I can become a Reiki healer by taking a course on Reiki. We can take any of those things that we love and appreciate about ourselves, any of those aims that we have, and we can turn them into I can sentences. And that gives you a map of self, a map of your way forward, of those things to focus on for manifesting. Because once we make clear our aims, we can move towards them much better, because we know where we're headed. We are focused on that direction. So I can do this, I can do that, I can enhance this by, I can use this skill by, and you have a map there of your absolute true self, because you've used your intuition of those things that you love and enjoy, those things that you love and appreciate about yourself, and you've used feeling and your sense of just knowing in order to create that map of self. Your true self. It's all about finding your true self, and the spiritual path is a lot to do with that as well. Okay, so in the next video I'll cover the triggers for awakening, how awakening gets started, and in Consciousness Rising I've put down all about how awakening can happen. I've also filled the book full of lots of experiences as well, both my experiences and general common experiences that other people have as well. So there's lots of stories in there, as well as inspiration and information too. So thanks so much for listening. I'm sending you lots of love and all the best, and I'll see you in the next video.